Kirby Right Back at Ya is an anime that started airing in 2001 in Japan and was dubbed 1 year later by 4Kids, infamous for its endless arbitrary and unnecessary changes throughout the properties. The show didn't do well critically outside of Japan, but despite that, it still left an impact on both the franchise and the fanbase. Many people got into the Kirby fandom because of this very anime, and if they didn't, it was thanks to Smash. Recently, however, there's been a decent amount of people who came forward to criticize it for its flaws, whether it be how it fails as an adaptation of the franchise given how inaccurate it is to the source material, or how political it can get. This isn't just the people who are bothered by how different it is either. Multiple Kirby fans have stated that the anime isn't that good, but is that right? Surprisingly, we didn't get a ranking video for this series. But that changes today, as I decided to take matters into my own hands. You're welcome. Now, I like the anime. It isn't perfect, even less so when it comes to portraying the characters from the games, but for what it's worth, I think it's still pretty fun. Back in 2020 and the first half of 2021, I started binge watching the entire show, but stopped it around episode 83. I don't know why, I just kinda stopped watching it and that was that. In the last year or so, I've gained a more critical eye, so I want to see how much the anime holds up today. Is it an underrated classic or just a list of forgettable episodes for kids? Before we get to ranking the episodes, I want to quickly set some ground rules. First of all, I watched the sub instead of the dub. This may upset some people, especially those who will argue the dub for this anime is pretty good, ironically or not, but I prefer the original because it doesn't make a lot of jokes that don't land, the episode order isn't messed up, and the music is pretty cool. That said, I'll still refer to the characters with their English names, with the exception of Lololo, Lalala and Nightmare. I'll refer to them with the original names from the games because they're Lololo, Lalala and Nightmare. No need to make silly name changes. Second, I'm going to review the two parters and refer to the finished movie as a whole. If they're part of the same narrative, there isn't a need to review them individually. Third, not a rule, but I'll review the pilot and 3D special too because why not? And fourth, I guess I should clarify that this video is just my personal opinion to be safe. You may think that an episode I ranked high on the list isn't that good, or that one I ranked lower isn't that bad, and that's perfectly fine. Just explain it rationally. I don't want to get into a fight because I didn't like Turned Out as much as you do. With that said, we've got 92 episodes to go, so let's jump into it. Dear Nova, this freaking episode, you have no idea how much I resent it. I love how people always bring up Shell-Shocked and Tune Out when talking about plots that don't belong in Kirby, but ignore this one, or act like it's not as bad. What did it do to me? I'll tell you. Remember how Kain barely appeared at the end of episodes 2 and 7? This is his first major appearance, and an awful one at that, given what they've decided to do with him, and how it's changed his character in the anime forever. Someone at Warp Starring decided that what they wanted to do with this pure soul was to make him fall in love with a young girl. Yeah, this episode is about them having a date. Kain is actually often referred to as Steve's love interest or boyfriend in this episode. I'm not joking, I'm not making things up, I'm not exaggerating. With the original title of The Fish Who Loved Me and lines like this, of this, it makes the relationship feel less like it's just an ordinary friendship. It's not even at a point where the characters are only joking about or humoring the idea. Oh no, they've taken it seriously. They even have multiple moments where they want you to sympathize with Kain, because of how hard it is for him to have an easy life with Tiff. It's hard to feel anything for him, however, when you realize what you're watching. Also, Curious saying only makes this episode all the more infuriating. It's sick, in a bad way, how they've committed to this plot. Now, the $1 million question is, what's so bad about Tiff and Kain dating? Well, first of all, Kain's a fish and Tiff is a Kirby, a species that somewhat resembles a human, go figure. The bigger issue is the implications. Kain may or may not be an adult, but you all know what kind of character Tiff is? Yes, she's smarter than most of the people around her, but at her core, she's a child. And if Kain and her are supposed to be a couple... yeah. And if you're wondering how 4Kids fixed this episode, they didn't, they made it worse. They made Kain's voice deeper, and this is one of the first things he says to Tiff.
I knew you and I would have a lot of things in common, Tiff, and that's why I'd like for you to be my girlfriend!
They really want to beat you in the head that this is supposed to be a couple and not just friends. And that happens in many subsequent episodes where he appears. When he isn't hanging out with her, he's asking Kirby where she is. But with this episode in mind, it's less of a cute "oh, he cares about her" and more of a disgusting "oh dear, he cares about her too much." To be fair, I do somewhat understand where many people come from when they say it isn't the worst thing ever. We don't know Kain's age, but if anything, that makes the plot worse, because I'm always asking myself, is this supposed to be an adult dating a minor? Is Kain a minor too? What is going on? I want an answer! This episode wants to be the Little Mermaid of the Kirby anime so badly, with Kain learning about life on land and having a partner, but I don't think they should have gone that far. Take a look at Going Bonkers, an episode I'll talk about later. Bonkers there is just visiting Kirby Town, looking for Kirby because he wants to be trained by the most powerful warrior in the land. And the episode does that without having a romantic relationship with him. That episode is pretty much this one done right. Oh heck, if you want to push it, have Kain act like this little, incompetent guy who thinks he's Tiff's bigger brother figure of something, and have him try to defend her. And the comedy would come from the situations not being that bad, of Kain being the one in danger. That would also make the scene where he wants to all dance with Tiff much more wholesome. Yes, it's weird, but it's weird in a somewhat cute way. And even without the romantic undertones, this episode is pretty boring. In the middle of the date, Kain ends up in some mayhem, and they make the shenanigans he gets into pretty boring. Besides getting almost murdered by Kawasaki, Dynaplate grabs him and he immediately manages to get off her feet. He gets in the mayor's bathtub, and it's just a little hot. It's perfectly fine. Let's just move forward before I start getting disgusted even more. This episode is terrible. I mean, do I need to explain why? It's infamous for one core plot point that almost anyone can agree is terrible. For that really small group still doesn't know what I'm talking about, I'll be going to the rest of the episode without mentioning first, because while the stuff doesn't hurt it as much, it still doesn't do it any favor. The episode wants to capture what made cartoon buffoons so great, but it somehow turned out worse than either of the escargoon torture parties. The making of moments of this episode are fine, but pretty dumb and unnecessary. It's either the characters making references or coming up with ideas that aren't good enough to be taken as serious speeches for a cartoon/movie, but aren't funny enough to be treated as jokes. The Walt Disney impersonator was also completely pointless. He's here to make a CG cartoon about a penguin and a blob fighting, and that's it. Kirby and King Dedede's CG mod. Kirby and King Dedede's CG models on his PC are even worse. Claims that the bottom line is more efficient than having dreams, and of course is evil. Seriously, the Walt Disney being evil joke has been beaten to the ground. if this portrayal is accurate, you don't need to see it every time any media is poking fun at him and of the company. It's been done already, and better, even from the mid-2000s. And besides, him being a monster in disguise is just another excuse to shoehorn in Kirby having to fight, a problem that seems to pervade in many episodes to begin with. And this whole scene is pointless because the Otter Kings still end up making an awful cartoon anyway, and it gets broadcast on television, no less. So far, I've established how bad this episode is on its own. It's boring, it has pointless plot points, and it somehow makes a subject matter boring when they tackled it early in the series in a fun way, but it's not necessarily worst of the worst bad. And now let's get to the elephant in the room. If you're like younger than 13 or you're older than that and still somehow managed to keep your innocence intact, you may want to skip this part of the video. Lose it at your own risk. 3, 2, 1.
Oh my god!
Yeah, for anybody who thought this adult version of Thief was a fake anime screenshot or something, it's not. So those 3 characters are stalkers, even ignoring the fact that they're after you-know-who for you-know-what. It's still creepy that a stranger in pop star of the Kirby series in general will go out of their way to spy on someone just to take pictures or record their sentences without their consent, especially when they're sleeping. Their names and designs don't help either. I do kind of like how they use abbreviations sometimes, it makes them more unique, and the scene where they get karate chopped by some of the women was pretty funny, but that's the only positive points I have from this episode. Remember when I said those 3 characters were stalking Thief a few seconds ago? This is why, because they wanted to make a sexy anime about her. Before I watched this episode for myself, I thought their unhealthy obsession with her would only be brought up in the ending, but like in A Fish Called Kind, we get to feel it for the majority of the episode. Some may play devil's advocate and ask, is it really that bad? After all, it's not the only time Kirby has delved into lewd territory. Thanks to Claude and Moyes, Germany was blessed with Kirby's Biggest Case, a comic that shows Kirby reading Playboy magazines. The thing with that comic is that it was never officially localized. It pretty much stayed in Japan. It pretty much stayed in Germany until a friend translated it and posted it online. But Kirby's Dream Land 2 has a level written Easter egg that shows a naked woman and there's a manga that shows Kirby with women watermelons. Here's the thing. For the former, the Easter egg was subtle. If you don't pay too much attention to it, you won't notice. And as for the latter, again, at least it wasn't officially localized. The Thief-related obsession those degenerates have is obvious, and the episode was localized and aired by 4 kids. Yes, this episode, A Fish Called Kind, and even Shell Shocked were perfectly fine for them, but an episode that teaches kids the importance of brushing your teeth is too much for them, because of how scary it is. And the way this episode ends only makes this problem worse. Thief doesn't react to the cartoon maturely, telling them they should be ashamed of themselves. No, she goes out of her way to chase them down with Edith's hammer, and Kirby joins in. I mean, why not? It's played for laughs. If the Otter Kings did learn their lesson or were obsessed with another, not underage character that may have not redeemed the episode, it still not feel like Kirby, but it would have been less infuriating and disturbing. I mean, imagine if they made a dirty anime about Diddy. That could have been pretty funny if handled properly, but no, we gotta have them make a cartoon about sexy Thief of the stars. Ooh. With all of that said, how is this episode better than A Fish Called Kind? At least in the cartoon, she looks like a teenager/adult, and at least she doesn't take her clothes off like some of her lines would imply. If we did see her naked, either in the original or the dub, I would have been even more harsh. Also, what this episode doesn't have, that a fish called Kain does, is the bastardization of a character I liked. That episode killed the anime's iteration of Kain for me. Meanwhile, turned out Star's characters that are unlikable always have been and always will be. Salute me, Altman Hotakings. You suck! So apparently, the show decided that after giving 2 regular Escargoon episodes in Season 1, it needed to balance that out with 2 Escargoon torture episodes in Season 4. At least with King Dedede, you could argue he does bad things, but Escargoon often only works for Dedede, and the bad things he does on his own aren't as nefarious. To be fair, I do like the beginning where Tiff and the Kirby's collect shells on the beach that are related to mollusks, and Escargoon sneezes because he's heard them talking smack about him, but King Dedede assumes him that it doesn't matter as long as he's happy. This is probably the only time he's been somewhat nice to Escargoon. Unfortunately, it's all downhill for me, as it mixes the disgust I felt in a fish called Kain and Tuned Out. King Dedede roasts some shells, and he notices Escargoons for the first time since forever, and wonders what's behind it. So he chases Escargoon around to the point where he actively tries to see it break, just to see his exposed body. This is how the rest of the episode goes. Why? I don't know. For the funny, I guess. And you know what makes it worse? His shell works like his spine. So essentially, he's getting a fragile part of his body assaulted. And there's also the scene where Dedede secretly watches him take it off. That's just... no. Even after Escargoon orders a shell that turns him into a monster, if hit by the enemy salesman, because of course we needed a monster in this episode, and puts His Majesty and the castle in danger, he still gets assaulted. But at the same time, you can't cut him some slack, because if he hadn't kept his secret to himself, none of this would have happened. He could have explained to His Majesty why he couldn't take off his shell with an explanation that's better than just, I don't want to. It does have some good jokes, unlike Right and Robot, mainly the one where King Dedede imagines Escargoon without his shell to look like one of the humans in the painting The Birth of Venus, and Kirby bringing a new shell for Escargoon was pretty nice. One thing's for sure, episodes like this would be worse without him, but that doesn't overshadow the messed up plot it's going for in the slightest. And guess what? I put this episode right above the last Escargoon torture party, cause I love you a lot. This one isn't as disgusting as the last 3, but honestly, after watching it, you will miss them. It's very upsetting because it has Escargoon actively realizing how miserable he is, and how he's mistreated by the king, and overworks himself to make a robot that could work as a substitute for him, only to get it destroyed multiple times. Especially in the last 5 minutes or so, where it's upgraded to cook, but King Dedede, being the jerk he is, presses the green and red switches when he is the Nightmare Enterprises salesman, talk about how relentless it will become if he does that. And of course, it inconveniences Kirby and the others, so it needs to be destroyed. Not helping is how Escargoon refers to his robot as a child multiple times. He sees it like a son of the younger brother figure he never had, and to see him witness its death, it's about as sad as Kirby losing his robot dog. But unlike that episode, you can't cut who calls its death some slack. Tiff was well-meaning in Kirby's pet peeve. She gave Kirby the pet because she wanted to give him a friend who wouldn't shame him for being different. But when she found out that it was a monster built by Nightmare Enterprises, she came to the conclusion that it would hurt him eventually. She was wrong, but even then, it's not like she knew back then that some of those monsters could be nice. And while she did drag it into the water, killing it in the process. It wasn't intentional. Heck, when it blew up, she felt so bad for the little guy that she asked Kango off screen to make a substitute, and what he made just couldn't live up to what the previous pet was. Tiff had a reason to be skeptical of the robot in that episode, and when she turned out to be wrong and destroyed it, did everything to make Kirby a happy camper again. King DDD here sees how Escargoon is beaten up and he thinks, oh wait, you're tired of me bossing you around? You need a break and made a replacement robot for this very reason? Clearly you must be lazy, and no one can replace you as my eternal punching bag. Just like with Shell Shocked however, you can't side with Escargoon either. He's constantly cracking an evil smile like he's supposed to be the antagonist of this episode. Am I supposed to root for him? Or does this episode frustrate me because I feel bad for him, and I don't want to see the king just torturing him for 20-something minutes? If Shell shocked that, at least he didn't have Escargoon lose an individually due to love. And no, Kirby sleeping next to Escargoon at the end doesn't make up for all the other things. One cute scene does not redeem it. King DDD discovers a holiday known as Appreciation Day, where everyone in Cape Town gives presents to a specific citizen. He grows jealous of the fact he's never celebrated one, so he decides to celebrate one, and everyone treats him terribly. I can't. Seriously? You make an anime DDD karma trip and this is the result? Making an episode that punishes him for his bad behavior isn't that hard. He's done so many terrible things in other episodes, like tricking Kawasaki into hooking Kirby for his teacher, imprisoning or manipulating others, and that's just a few examples. Just have King DDD do something heinous for the first few minutes and have that serve the reason for the torture he gets in the rest of the episode. And yeah, that's what the episode does, but the reason is just so baffling. Get this. He was jealous that he didn't get some presents and made an appreciation day that lasted forever. And that's why he gets the short end of the stick. I mean, boo-hoo, that's gotta be one of the biggest crimes of all time. You could argue that this episode is meant to be the straw that broke the camel's back, but unfortunately this anime is an episodic show, with the only exceptions being the specials and the movie. And the episode doesn't point to the deeds the king has done in the others to justify the torment he gets here. And even then, even if the show had strong continuity, this is too much for the town? I don't mind them saying that King DDD doesn't deserve someone appreciating him. It's a bit cruel, but whatever, a king does some cruelty. And His Majesty is a bad role model in the anime, don't idolize him. But them mocking him and his every move and sentence is just... oh dear. And it's not even done playfully, it's like they legitimately resent him for no real reason. At least Tiff does put her money where her mouth is, asking Kirby to bring King DDD a watermelon as a gift, trying to cheer him up even after Kirby took a bite out of it, and shaming the Cappies for encouraging his disdain days idea. But I suppose I may as well flush that down the toilet, because after giving Kirby bombs disguised as watermelons, she thinks King DDD has gone too far, and she teams up with the Cappies to prank His Majesty back. And do they get back at His Majesty, I hear you ask? They play out a funeral for Kirby. Like, I get it. He made him eat bombs, but how do you explain these sentences?
だがこれ以上わしのイメージは悪くせんぞい。今度はわしの美しい真の姿を見せるぞい。はい。
これは陛下。
注文ぞい。カービィに真心のこもった豪華プレゼントを贈りたいぞい。
He did that just to even things out. He thought Kirby's gift was a prank and not a sweet gesture. And after getting back at him, he went out of his way to make a present for his rival because he cares about him deep down. Plus, Kirby has dealt with so much worse in the series. Is feeding bombs to him going too far, even though we all know he'd have probably survived either way? Or is it that bad because King DDD is bad? I don't care how evil he is in other episodes, he isn't here. He's not portrayed as a one-note villain. But the episode still paints King Dedede as the bad guy, and it needs to toy with his emotions as much as possible with the funeral scene so that he cries uncontrollably when he thinks Kirby is dead, and gives him the watermelon. And the Cappies did a great thing, because this way he's opened up his heart, and he's happy that Kirby is still alive, so much so that he hugs him, and he wouldn't have shown any appreciation for him without the funeral prank. Man, you guys are so toxic, aren't you? When a scene like this is not only better out of context, but good only out of context, you know you failed out. In Right Hand Robot and Shell Shocked, I couldn't side with the protagonist or the antagonist. But here, I don't even know who I'm supposed to be rooting for anymore. I'm against both sides. Kirby, Thief, Tough, and all the Cappies for not being careful enough with the gift delivery and playing at a funeral, and King Dedede and Escargoon for making Kirby eat explosives over something that's indeed very petty, and it's a wonder how I put this above the Escargoon torture episodes. The only positive was the scene where Kawasaki was pranked and got his face hit by pies. So yeah, thank you King Dedede for making Kawasaki disdain their thing. The rest of this episode can go down in a hole. I like Kirby's fantasy sequence. I like Dedede's prank he did to Kirby. I like the art style used when Kirby talks about Dynablade. Dedede and Escargoon go bird watching, as suddenly a ruthless wind pulverizes several landscapes. Turns out that was no ordinary wind, it was caused by the legendary Dynablade. The first few minutes aren't that bad. Seeing Tough blaming Dedede for the damages instead of Thief was a nice change of pace. But the episode nosedives once it's revealed that Kirby ate all the watermelons in the fields, or at least some of them. Yeah, if Depreciation Day was a King Dedede torture episode, and Right Hand Robot and Shell Shocked were Escargoon torture episodes, this is what I would call a Kirby torture episode. At least with those three, the episodes are against antagonists, and you could argue that because they've done nasty stuff in the past, they deserve the torment they get in them. It's not a good argument in my opinion, but it's an argument you could use to defend them. What's this episode's excuse? Kirby is the protagonist of the show. Well, except when he isn't, but you know what I mean. He makes some mistakes, but guess what? Everyone does. Some mistakes are worse than others, but Kirby's bad deeds aren't usually that bad. And when they are, they're usually forgivable because he's a baby. Do you expect a 2-year-old to know what's right and what isn't? Speaking of which, what wrong did he do in this episode to deserve all the torment he gets? Kirby ate some watermelons because he was hungry, so of course he spends the rest of the episode getting chased and scolded by the Cappies. If that's the justification for everything that happens in an episode to a character, then something's wrong. But don't you worry, it gets even better! So King Dedede decides to trick his rival into eating an egg. Plot twist, it wasn't food, just an egg that could eventually hatch. Kirby was just tricked into thinking it was. Dynablade goes back to his nest and loses his marbles. Loses her marbles because her egg is missing, and later finds out Kirby ate it, thanks to King Dedede. But we learn in the epilogue that sure, Kirby was trying to roast the chicken, but when the Dyna chick came out, he let it escape. So it's all a wacky misunderstanding where Kirby is scolded by the Cappies and by his friends, and chased and threatened to be eaten by Dynablade. If you want to make an episode that calls out Kirby for his bad tendencies, that's cool, but this is not how you do that. Instead of Kirby being punished for something he did, we get Kirby being punished for something he didn't do, and what he did do, he probably regrets. He just can't express it. All he wanted was to satisfy his appetite. He wasn't being malicious, he didn't do anything malicious. Heck, Kirby tried to resist busting the egg, like he knew that what DDD and Escargoon were telling him to do was wrong. Even if you don't know what happened, how could you imagine the worst when you have little evidence that the pink purple will do that, and what you have is endlessly obtuse? Meta Knight I get it, he can be cruel sometimes, but that's because it's part of his character. Seeing Ku and the others blame Kirby for doing something he didn't even do, and not trying to fix the problem because they wouldn't forgive someone if they had their child, really hits you. It makes Kirby miserable, no matter how little the events affect him emotionally. Even the ending needs to keep Kirby on his toes, like, come on guys, give him a break. Yes, he attacks Dynablade a few times, but I'm confident in calling these attacks self-defense. Think from Kirby's point of view for a moment. He doesn't know Dynablade, he doesn't know why she's mad at him. Think from Kirby's point of view for a moment. He doesn't know Dynablade, he doesn't know why she's mad at him. So it's no wonder why he thinks she's just another monster ordered by his arch-nemesis. It's not like the 6 episodes that were previously aired had sympathetic monsters. And when you see that ending, it runs into the same problem Depreciation Day has, where it doesn't feel emotional in the slightest if you know the context. Dynablade's chick enters the scene, helps Kirby and the chef some food. Dynablade's mood changes completely, like a switch has been pressed. She is happy now because her son is alive, and Kirby is a good brother. She strokes his forehead as a way to say thanks, and now it's a warm and fuzzy episode. I don't buy it. These two only have one bonding moment. How could you forgive him so easily? If it was like in the campaign from Kirby's Fun Pack where Kirby babysits her children and makes them learn a thing or two to show it's not so bad, then I get it. But this isn't enough. And it's not supposed to be a joke. It plays emotional music, Dynablade cries, the water jumps. I don't think it's irrational to say this scene is supposed to be taken at face value. You may think I'm being too harsh on this episode, but I don't know. This is the 3rd time I watched it, and it's still really hard to sit through. A fish called Kain tuned out and shell-shocked disgusted me, and Depreciation and Might and Robot made me angry. But this episode just made me sad. Luckily there's another episode where Dynablade has a major role that does this misunderstanding plot infinitely better than this one, and another that thanks Kirby that's a little better. I wanted to like Fitness Fiend so badly, but I'm sorry, this episode has some messed up implications that I cannot ignore or defend. We see Kirby eating some chips made to fatten him up, but King DDD wants to eat them too, and before long he gets addicted to them and watches TV non-stop for about 1 week, only stopping when he has to go to the bathroom or sleep, sometimes. Then King DDD gets fat, and eventually Kirby too, and we see them in all their glory, and the episode thinks it's funny? That's the problem with this episode, it doesn't treat obesity with respect. And sure, only the Cappies and Escargoon make jokes at the king's expense. Tiff, Taff, Lololo, Lalala, Yabui, and Meta Knight know better than that. But that still muddles the message it's trying to go for. And the Max Flexer song is outright idiotic. Don't get me wrong, I love this song, it's really catchy. But I only enjoy it out of context. In context, it's a sadistic musical number that punishes people with obesity with death or near-death sentences. Get punched, that's what you get for eating too much. Look, there are spikes behind you, either run as fast as you can or die! And let's not forget the ending where Kirby vomits out the chips. Yeah, that's a good moral for people with this disease. Just throw up the food you ate, it's as simple as that. The episode wants to teach you to be fit, and the dangers of eating too much junk food, but it treats this subject matter as well as Family Guy would. And I get it, it's a monster from Nightmare Enterprises, But my point still stands. It's their fault they got fat. But that doesn't mean they deserve this, or this, or this. And all of this is coming from someone who has never been obese or chubby in their entire life. Imagine if someone with that issue watched it. They're struggling to lose even just a few pounds. They may want to watch an episode of this anime to temporarily forget about it. And they chose this one that downright doesn't treat it with respect.
姿を見なくなった。風邪かな？風邪なんかひくやつじゃない。死んだんじゃないの？
Remember how I said earlier that there was an episode that frames Kirby for his bad tendencies that's better than Kirby's excellent adventure? Well, here it is. It's also terrible, but for different reasons. Let's talk about them one at a time. Number 1. The episode is about framing Kirby for his crimes, but 2 of them are edited recordings of him being helpful, i.e. telling a lady they dropped a bag of chips and eating Kawasaki's leftovers. And the only one which isn't is Kirby eating watermelons from the watermelon fields without permission, minus the trampling, which even then has already happened in the show. It makes for a very confusing narrative. Is this meant to be a call out on Kirby's bad behavior? Is this just DDD framing Kirby because he's the antagonist? Is this both? Number 2. Even if those 3 crimes all happened and weren't edited, they're not enough for a 20-minute episode. The premise of Kirby being framed for 3 simple crimes, and that's it, would barely even work for a 10-minute episode. It's just not enough material to work with. Number 3. Courtroom scenes are downright laughable. Here's how the average scene plays out. Tiff, as the defense, talks about how Kirby isn't bad. King DDD says, "But the footage! We have it! It proves he's a criminal!" Then she starts talking about how the footage is a fake, but she doesn't have time to finish because whoop whoop, it's time for a silly commercial! Makes you not take the episode seriously. It's not even in the so bad it's good territory. It's just weird. Number 4. Speaking of which, the commercials are nothing to write home about. They're not good, they're not funny weird, they're just there. The ones in our reality TV were far more WTF-esque. The only one that's weird in this episode is the first one, and even then, it plays out before we even get in a courtroom. Number 5. The episode realizes later on that it's not even close to the end, so it suddenly turns into everybody making up claims about crimes Kirby didn't commit. And then into an argument about how strong Kirby is, and how he's got a black hole for a stomach, and how much he eats, which again doesn't prove anything either. Just because somebody is strong doesn't mean they're bad. And having a Kirby loves to eat food joke isn't breaking new ground because we've already seen them in this show. The first episode had a joke like that. The episode does have a heartfelt conversation with Tiff and Meta Knight after all of this, and it may even be my favorite Meta Knight moment in the entire show. Tiff asks him if he could help her and Kirby justice once, to which he responds, which is a pretty beautiful message. Yes, you may be younger than your opponent, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're weaker or dumber than them. You can outsmart them if you try hard enough. It's a shame that the conflict suddenly gets solved in a matter of seconds. Tiff sells some newspapers that tell authors, "Kirby isn't evil, Lemao," and everyone suddenly buys it. Once again, it only seems like the conflict is solved because it's the end of the episode and because of the status quo. If this happened in, say, a reality TV, or at an earlier point of this episode, the Cappies would have not believed them, but for some reason they just do because plot armor, I guess. even when King Dedede publishes his own newspapers. Although it was pretty funny seeing Kirby spit Dedede's newspapers in his face, so there's that.